Welcome back to another instalment of New Zealand's Bird of the Week, where in this video I will be talking about the saddleback, vocal birds that while once being common, declined to near extinction before being saved by intrepid conservationists, and are now slowly but surely making a recovery in protected areas. I hope you enjoy. Saddlebacks and teake comprise currently of two species in the Arcoleo family, the New Zealand wattlebirds, meaning that the most closely related to both kokako and the now extinct huia. Both species are a glossy black and have a chestnut red saddle and rump, also having small wattles hanging from the base of their bill. It's been found through recent research that through DNA analysis that their ancestors arrived in New Zealand about 20 million years ago, something which for a long time was shrouded in mystery. Several marine straits which have separated the North and South Islands, including the Manawatu Strait which covered up through modern-day Palmerston North, seems to have coincided in the North Island forms of kokako and teake, splitting off from their South Island relatives, which would have happened around 3 to 2.5 million years ago. What is not yet known is if the ancestors of these birds were present on both of the main islands and were then separated by the marine straits, or if they were both around on one island then flew across the different straits to the other side. Huia are known to have split from saddlebacks about 8 million years ago, although determining both of these speciation events and what drove them remains a mystery. It may well be that there may have been populations of huia on the South Islands. They were only known from the north when people were around, and so they may have become locally extinct there. They were about 25 centimetres in length and weigh about 70 grams, about the size of a blackbird, and both species differ in some ways. The North Island birds have a buff-coloured line at the front edge of their saddle, and are also smaller with larger wattles, having a slimmer bill, as well as different vocalisations, with the South Island birds having their own call, which is more melodious, with the North Island birds being accused of sounding like a creaking door. Juvenile southern saddlebacks, also being known as jackbirds, don't have a full set of wattles until they're at least a year old, and are also the rarer of the two species, having a very narrow brush with extinction, as will be soon talked about. Birds are poor flyers, and instead usually use their strong legs to instead hop and fly noisily for short distances, and will patrol their habitats looking for invertebrates that they can pull out either from rotten logs, under bark, or in forest full litter. They will also eat fruit and nectar when available, even being seen killing mice with their sharp pecks, not too far off from how woodpeckers can act, and are very effective in doing so. They make a lot of chatter, having a call that is reminiscent of a laugh, and are very humorous to see in person, with up to 200 different types of songs being recorded, and their diversity and distribution correlating with their translocation history. Birds are typically spring and summer breeders, with birds forming long-term monogamous pair bonds and occupying the same territories for their entire lives. These are maintained by wing displays, as well as courtship feeding. Female birds build a cup-shaped nest of vegetation in tree cavities, rock crevices, and even in dense, ground-level vegetation. Their clutch sizes can be 1 through 4, and can rear up to 4 broods in an optimal season, typically 1 to 2 in established populations. They are incubated for about 20 days by the female only, and then both adults rearing their nestlings for the next month while they are in the nest, and will continue to feed them after fledging. They are most common in coastal and regenerating native forest, and occur at lower densities in mature areas, liking mixed areas of habitat the most. Saddlebacks have a big reputation both in Maori mythology and culture, whether that be as guardians, weather predictors, guides, or fortune tellers. Their Maori name of teake comes from an imitation of their cry, and are also known as teakai, another similar word which usually means guard or keep watch. The bands on their back, which gave them the English name according to Maori tradition, comes from the god Maui. After wrangling and beating up the sun mercilessly from a previous story, the sun begged for mercy and Maui released it. Its energy now dissipated, so that it would only be able to slowly and wearily move across the sky, which is explained as to why the world has longer daylight hours. The heat emanated by the sun made Maui very thirsty, and so he asked a nearby saddleback to bring him some cold water. This bird, however, pretended not to hear and took no notice, which infuriated him so much that he grabbed them, in doing so singeing their feathers with the heat of his hands, leaving a permanent marking of how they annoyed him. Maui then threw the birds into the water that he had been unable to reach previously, which is a reason that they also go by the name of waterbird. They were also thought to keep guard over ancient treasures, and when a war party heard the calls from the right, it was considered an omen of victory, and an omen of defeat if heard from the left. Both species of saddleback came very close to extinction after European arrival, suffering a very noticeable decline after rats and stoats became more common, with pioneering conservationist Richard Henry being aware that while they, along with animals like pio, were common in the late 1890s by the Seaforth River in Fiordlands, by 1901 he could not find a single one. Birds had the unfortunate habits of nesting and roosting in tree holes and cavities, and so they could easily be cornered and killed, a fate also being faced by yellowheads and carcers who do the same. North Island birds were confined to a single population on Hen Island, Tauranga, off the northeast coast, and the potential rival rats to nearby islands remained a big and consistent threat. In 1964, conservationists, including Brian Bell and Don Merson, who is a mainstay of these videos, managed to successfully transfer some birds from Hen Island to nearby Whatapaike Island. Likely the first time in history the translocation of a species anywhere in the world has been successfully carried out. Their efforts meant that they are now resident on 19 islands, and are now in a great position to survive, with birds now having some mainland populations in fenced sanctuaries. They've even started to venture beyond the protection of these fences, with volunteers at Zealandia in Wellington in October of 2014 coming across a saddleback nest outside of the predator-proof fence, the first instance of them hatching outside a sanctuary on mainland New Zealand for over a century. After securing the North Island birds, Merson and his team then moved on to help the South Islands birds, which were in an even more precarious position. The only surviving birds were those residing on islands off of the southwestern part of Rakiura Stewart Islands, and were known to be vulnerable for well over 50 years by the government. They were confined to the South Cape Islands, Big South Cape, Solomon and Pukaweka, the first being the largest but still small at just 104 hectares. Their sanctuary didn't last, however, as a mussenburger was alerted to the presence of rats on Big South Cape, and that they had rapidly spread to the other two islands from a boat that had been carrying them unknowingly. The New Zealand Wildlife Service, now DOC, came in to remove as many birds as possible, and to assess what could be done. Those in positions of authority in wildlife management at the time, despite extensive warnings by rangers and others, thought that the birds and other native wildlife would be able to adapt to the presence of rats, and that they would find a quote-unquote natural equilibrium, talk carried over from the defunct acclimatisation societies which had brought in so many of the pests to begin with, in order to make New Zealand feel more like Europe. Along with saddlebacks, the last known Stewart Island snipe, bush wren, as well as greater short-tailed bats were also present, and all of these animals too were attempted to be saved. Rat numbers continue to increase over the conservationist time on the island, with them managing to eat out their hut, destroying their wallpaper, eating food supplies and dropping waste everywhere. The island's vegetation was also being stripped bare, and the forest floors were barren, with little to no seedlings being able to grow. Using mist nets, the team of intrepid wildlife service members worked diligently to both find and capture as many birds as possible, and in spite of the subantarctic weather and heavy swells, they managed to net and move 36 saddlebacks to safety on Pestbury Big and Kamahu Islands, thereby narrowly averting their extinction. The other two bird species were not so lucky, with the two snipes dying suddenly before transfer, likely due to starvation, and the 6 bush wren did not survive for long after their translocation, last being seen in 1972 before vanishing entirely. The saddleback surviving was, however, an incredible undertaking, highlighting the threats that rats posed. They weren't considered as being so ecologically damaging in the country until then, and the saddlebacks were then moved to varying other offshore islands to increase their genetic diversity and to ensure that they would be safe from predators. Now found on 11 small islands, their tiny founding population now numbers over 700 birds, likely more, and are now doing a whole lot better. In total, about 7,000 plus mainland birds exist, and if trends continue with predator control, we may well see these energetic birds back in mainland forests once more if efforts continue. And with that, I thank you for watching this instalment of New Zealand's Bird of the Week. For next time, you're now able to vote for the Kermadec storm petrel, birds which have been quite an enigma. With that, I'll see you next time, whenever that may be.